RoHS testing, compliance and certification. You have to verify whether your products are RoHS compliant. It can be one product intended for the EU market, multiple models, or even your entire production. Your designs can have a dozen or thousands of different components, depending on their complexity. Therefore, you are considering RoHS testing of electrical or electronic equipment against the RoHS requirements. How to test your products and verify their compliance against the RoHS substances. You essentially have two options. Either you do the test yourself, or you benefit from tests that a stakeholder in your supply chain has already conducted. Then you use the gathered information to make your technical file. Number 1. Analytical RoHS testing. With the analytical testing approach, you will do physical testing on samples. We can find various types of analytical testing on the market, depending on the chemicals to be analyzed. Here are some of the main ones. XRF spectrometry method. With this method, it is possible to identify a material composition by bombarding it with high-energy X-rays. Chromatography for RoHS testing. Chromatography consists of chemically separating the elements of a dissolved mixture. Gas chromatography enables to detection of the presence of PBB, PBDEs, or phthalate and find out their concentration in a given material. Should I use the analytical testing approach? Generally speaking, no, at least not as a primary approach to test complex products like electronic equipment. Too costly, as a lab would have to conduct many tests. If your product contains 100 different components, then there may be 500 homogeneous materials to test. Destructive. You will have at least to have one product dismantled to get every homogeneous material. Insufficient. Despite your investment in such testing, you will not get a guarantee from your suppliers that the parts will remain compliant with RoHS. Number 2. RoHS testing with documentary review from your supply chain. Since it is not realistic to do comprehensive analytical testing on your products, another option is available: the documentary approach. Here, you will perform a risk analysis based on your product bill of materials and use the information your suppliers have already collected from their suppliers to confirm compliance with RoHS. Manufacturer's certificates of compliance. What EnviroPass recommends is to gather as much relevant RoHS information as possible from your supply chain, build a robust technical file, and demonstrate due diligence. As a rule of thumb, your manufacturing suppliers know their parts better than you do. Their products are not as complex as yours, and they deal directly with their suppliers of components or materials. When available, their certificates of compliance, COC, are significant pieces of information, as long as they are up to date in terms of listed RoHS substances and exemptions, cover the parts under investigation, are consistent with the anticipated likelihood of RoHS substances in a given component. COC can be of different formats. Feel free to use the EnviroPass EPEC form to gather the needed environmental information from your supply chain. Other documents, such as specifications and harmonized safety data sheets, SDS, may also enable you to determine the RoHS status of certain materials. Likewise, you can use testing reports as proof of compliance. However, test reports of samples don't give you any guarantee that all of the supplied parts remain compliant over time. Should I follow the RoHS documentary approach? For complex products like electronic devices, with more than 10 different homogeneous materials, the quick answer is yes. To help you build sufficient technical documentation, the International Electrotechnical Commission, IEC, has issued the 63000 standard for technical documentation for the assessment of electrical and electronic products concerning the restriction of hazardous substances. Along with IEC, CENELEC, European Committee for Electrotechnical Standardization, strongly recommends the documentary approach when it comes to RoHS compliance. It is a comprehensive method. It is heavily reliable because it is comprehensive, and it relies on supplier statements. Based on quality control of the collected information, you can rely on the statements you receive. Importantly, it is cost-effective. It is not destructive. There aren't product shipping costs. It is a more sustainable method because it avoids product transportation and destruction. To update your technical file, you will only need to gather the missing information for the additional parts and according to the latest applicable regulatory changes. Does it mean that analytical RoHS testing is useless? Analytical testing may be necessary at the last resort, for medium to high-risk homogeneous materials without sufficient RoHS compliance guarantee from the suppliers. For a part without sufficient RoHS information and that is found risky according to your IEC 63000 type assessment, you can try to find a replacement, like an alternative part, that is deemed compliant. However, in rare cases, it is impossible to replace that part because there is no alternative. Then you have no other choice than initiating an analytic testing plan on the risky homogeneous materials of that same part. If the suspected restricted substance is indeed present in the risky homogeneous material, then corrective actions must be taken to make the product compliant. Then how do I assure RoHS compliance through RoHS testing? Have a compliance plan that you will detail in an internal RoHS procedure enabling you to show how you perform due diligence. Get organized and follow a PDCA, Plan Do Check Act, strategy for continuous improvement of your RoHS testing endeavor. Include in your procedure a risk analysis approach per the well-recognized IEC 63000 standard. Checking that suppliers are RoHS compliant is not sufficient. You ideally want a commitment from your suppliers that your parts are and will remain EU RoHS compliant, either with or without exemption. Make sure the COCs are up to date and enable you to confirm RoHS compliance. Verify the exemption status. You are free to use our to-date EPEC form to scan your suppliers and gather their statements. Execute analytical testing on specific homogeneous materials as a last resort, when you have no other choice before modifying your product design. Then, you should be able to prepare your product declaration of compliance. Ask Enviropass for a free online consultation to see a RoHS technical file.